Good day and welcome to Quilting with Don. Hi, I'm Don if there's those just tuning in. And this is the next video series on my quilting journey, if you will. Now, I'm going to get to the title in a bit, but let me give you a bit of a backstory. I've been doing some quilting for the last 2 or 3 years, even joined a local quilting guild, and I'm having a good time with it. Now, as you may know if you've watched any of the previous videos, I don't just quilt. I do a lot of scuba diving, I do skiing, I do piping, and other things, mountain biking. So anyway, the point I'm trying to get to of saying that is that I haven't been doing much quilting lately, but I'm getting into the next session of my quilting journey. So yeah, having said that, what's this all about? Well, in the last episode of Quilting with Don, where I gave you an update and showed you a bit of what I had just done before, which is a very cool art quilt with poppies, and I really quite enjoyed that, I asked you that were willing to give me some ideas on what my next quilt should be, and I had 3 options. Well, it turns out that through the comments, majority of you picked the one I was leaning towards. So either that means you know me, which is quite possible, or just it's the right one to do. And I am going to do a geometric quilt. The pattern, I'll show you again on the big screen there. It's called Astrid, but it's a very cool geometrically laid out design that intrigues me. So I've also decided to, when I go with this, I've organized my fabric, and I'll get to that in a bit. You might even see bits of it here or there. Is that I'm going to do what I would call a medium-sized, well, they call it a lap-sized quilt. It's going to be, by design, about 65 inches by 65, so remember that. But there's more. Now, at the same time I've been percolating this idea, something I'd been thinking about before, Carol and I both, if you recall from about a year ago, for those that are still sticking with me, is I did this very cool Bargello quilt called Eye of Sauron. And there's a link at the top, and it came out great. The process of building that quilt also generated many, many scraps. There were strip sets, there were loose pieces, and so Carolyn and I, if you know Carolyn, if you've ever seen her talk about it, she hates wasted fabric. So we set off together to build a scrap quilt out of my Eye of Sauron scraps. And we called that quilt Scraps of Sauron. In fact, we built another quilt with it. There were so many. But the main one is that Scraps of Sauron was entered in the quilt show last summer. And it won a first prize award. It won a first prize for the challenge quilt, where we had to have a fixed size quilt that was then judged against other fixed size quilts and then given to charity. Given to, they're called comfort quilts. And Scraps of Sauron that we built together got first place. But we didn't get to keep it. But here's the picture of it, just so, well, anyway, there it is. What's been percolating is that we really like that quilt. So I've been aiming to build another one. And then a light bulb moment, as Gru would say, Despicable Me. Anyway, we just watched one of those movies recently. Is that if I'm going to do this quilt, why don't I turn it into a pattern so that other people can do it? And so I actually sat down, went over the design, a potential design, fabric requirements, and mapped it all out, and I came up with a design. So I am going to produce a pattern and a demo quilt for a new quilt based on Scraps of Sauron, and I'll get to the title of that in a sec. Keep you on your toes. So here's where things all come together. So now, suddenly, I've got 2 quilts that I'm thinking of doing. In past conversations, when Carolyn and I talk with fellow quilters, Carolyn always makes a point saying, Don only works at 1 quilt at a time. And they chuckle, because clearly those that are right into quilting never have just 1 project at a time. So I'm going to break that mold of me, and I'm going to do 2 projects at once. I am going to do the geometric quilt, and I'm going to do this pattern quilt that I'm going to give you a name for at the same time. But there's more. So the design I've come up with is going to be roughly 62 inches by 62 inches for the Scraps of Sauron clone. Well, remember the first one is 65 by 65, this one is 62 by 62. Another light bulb moment. I'm going to take those 2 quilt tops and put them together. One is the front and one is the other front. So it'll be a dual layered reversible quilt. That's the plan. I mentioned that to Carol and she goes, I don't like it. She said every quilt should stand on its own. Well, I'm breaking that rule too, because I figured what the heck, I'm doing 2 quilts. I'm going to make a reversible quilt and then we'll figure out what to do with it. but it's going to be fun. And the point is, I'm going to do these together at the same time. So I'll cut the fabric for one, I'll cut the fabric for two. That is why this series of quilting videos with Quilting with Dawn is going to be called Dueling Quilts. Now you get the title, Dueling Quilts, 2 quilt designs at the same time. We'll see how that comes out. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about the geometric quilt. As I mentioned before, it's called Astrid. I don't know what I'm going to end up calling this quilt. Maybe I'll just call it Geo. Wait, why don't I just call it Geo? So Geo is going to is made up of 16 2.5-inch strips. This is the design of the quilt. And it also includes a base fabric, which provides a border but also a centerpiece for each block. And it has a sashing fabric color. And this is the fun part that I've already done and I'm going to show you now is the color choices I'm making for Geo. So I'm going to do the strip set pieces in 2 colorways, blues and reds. Well, and orange is a kind of red. I'm not sure I like this one. But here you can see the neat blue fabrics and the neat red fabrics. A little bit of a history on this. Each of these blue fabrics I have used in one of my previous quilts. So these are some of my scraps. I can't say the same for each of these red fabrics because a couple guild meetings ago, or 3, this thing called Strip Club was started. A strip club at a guild? A quilting guild? Well, maybe that's the whole fun of it. It's actually an idea where people will bring in strips, put them into a pot, and then draw the winner that takes all the strips home. So I did that, and I won some red strips. So these are out of that collection. These 3 are from strips that I won. This orange I had kicking around that I haven't used yet, but I like it. I'm just not sure it works yet. But the point is, here are my 16 strips with 8 colors in 2 colorways. And I'm gonna form those together. You'll see into the pattern, and it's gonna be cool. Now here's the other thing. The sashing is this, just you look, oh, that's just plain white. And when I was at the store just yesterday looking for fabric with Carolyn, I came across this and at first I dismissed it. And Carolyn came back to it and said, no, look closely at it. It sparkles. It's got a bit of a glowy, sparkly sheen to it. So, aha, that could be fun. And then also, Carolyn, I raided her stash because she went somewhere in the past and got yardage in bolts of fabric. She got some really good ideas in bolts. So this is going to be my main block and border fabric. It's really a darkish blue with cool stuff on it. And then the sashing is going to be white. So these are the fabrics I have chosen for Geo, the quilt. The good news is on this pattern, it's very well written. I'll even give you a link to it on the screen to show you. It's made by GE Quilting Designs and by a lady called Gudrun Edria. So she apparently does a lot of patterns. She's online. And my point I'm making is that her pattern is very well laid out. I read through it. I did the math on it. Everything is bang on because I've done other patterns that sometimes they make printing mistakes or make typos and suddenly the math doesn't work. This all works. Okay, now let's talk about the quilt pattern I'm going to make. And here, you ready for this? It's going to be called Cathedral Glass. Because that is what Scraps of Sauron reminded us of. Here it is again. That was Scraps of Sauron. Now here is my layup with some arbitrary colors of the lap size or 62-inch by 62-inch Cathedral Glass quilt. There it is. It reminds us of what you see in a stained glass window looking from the inside, looking out. Here's the best part. For the size I'm making, and this is actually the main design I went for, it has almost 0 waste. It uses exactly 1 jelly roll with almost nothing left over. So obviously you got to be good at cutting. And it uses 2 yards of black fabric. Well, remember I was talking about Carolyn getting bolts? She just happened to get a bolt of black fabric. But I'm going to use 2 yards of it, and that's almost exactly what it needs. So between a jelly roll and 2 yards of black fabric, you get Cathedral Glass. The other cool part is while I was at it, I did all the math and the layups for 2 other sizes. A smaller size, which I guess is less than lap size, I don't know what you would call it, but it's 48 inches by 62. And then I came up with a larger size, here it is, that is 74.5 inches by 62. Now, this is really without much of a border. It's just sashing around the edges that matches the black sashes that are vertically in the design. You could certainly add borders and make it larger. And in fact, I'm going to do that a bit for my dueling quilts because Geo was 65. My cathedral glass demo is going to be 62. Well, I'm going to make it 65. And then probably a little larger because when you lay it up on the quilting machine, on the long arm, one of those two, the backing is usually wider and taller than the quilt top you're doing because that way you can put the leaders on it, you have areas to check tension and so on. And I'm going to do both projects with my trusty Singer 99K. I love this sewing machine. Built in 1956 if I recall correctly. So it's older than I am. And I mean, it should do exactly what I need. It has a great 1/4 inch presser foot. It sews great even seams and it works. So I'm looking forward to using this. So stay tuned because in the next episode, I'm going to be cutting fabric and laying it up, and it should be an adventure because I'll be doing both quilts at the same time. And in fact, since both are going to need the design wall, it could be dueling design wall designing. I don't know yet how it's going to work out. I have to figure it out. So stay tuned. It's going to be an adventure. You guys have a great one. Cheers.